Okay, today we're looking at the key to overcoming fear. And this is not the kind of fear that if you're hiking through our woods and encounter a bear or something like that. It's the kind of fear that we often carry without really thinking about the fact that we're even doing it. It's a feeling that the other shoe is going to drop, or some sense that things are not right, that we're not living up to some standard or whatever. There's all kinds of ways to experience fear, but I think you'll have a better understanding of what I'm talking about by the time we get into this. But I was listening to a story of a woman told of her childhood, explaining how she was taught to believe she was never enough. As she grew into an adult, she adopted the Christian faith as a way of making sure that she was enough to be saved and enter heaven. She wanted to make sure all of her I's were dotted and her T's were crossed. This is what she said. It's kind of interesting that I also saw an interview with a former advertising executive. And he pointed out, totally unrelated interviews, that as an advertiser, his job was to make people feel inadequate, to make them feel like they're not enough, that you have to buy the product that he's pushing in order to make yourself whole, to make yourself feel like you're whole. So we're bombarded with advertisement all the time, and it is usually comes across in a pretty good way where you're not really thinking, I feel inadequate, but it tends to show us happy people and pretty people. It gives a very good picture of what we could be if we just had that car, or we lived in that neighborhood, or we bought that sweater. We had that sweater. So the point is, in selling, is to convince people that they need the product, even if you have never even thought about it until that moment. And this is not to say that there's anything wrong with sales, but when you stop and think about, how would we come up with this idea that we're inadequate, that we're not enough? Well, we may get it in our religious training, but we also can get it in our secular training. When we enter school, we enter grade systems, and I made many grades that made me feel like I was not enough, that I was not a good student. I think I'm a better teacher than I was a student, I hope, because I would be a very average teacher otherwise, because I was an average student. I'm a straight A student when it comes to self-learning. When I choose the subjects I want to learn and pursue, I'm very good at that. I really enjoy that. But when you're born and your culture casts you into a school system that you're not really wanting to go to. Now, a lot of people did want to go to it, but I was one of those that thought going to school was a waste of time, a waste of, you could be doing a lot of other very productive things, if you weren't in school. And we always look forward to the weekends in the summer. That was something to live for. But there are many things in place that might make us feel inadequate. We could have grown up through a family that maybe there was competition with siblings, or just parents who were not necessarily really encouraging. And we might have come up, I don't know where this woman got her feeling. Karen Thomas is her name. She's from Germany, by the way, just so you can put a face with a name. But during a surgical operation, she died. She had an incredible near-death experience. What she learned was that she was not only enough, but she was also far more than anything she had ever imagined. And that's the point that I want to emphasize today, is that if we have any sense, and she was living in fear, she said, as the result of this feeling inadequate, which is why she joined the church and tried to be, do all the things properly so she'd be saved. If you think there's a chance that you're going to go to hell when you die, for example, that's kind of nerve-wracking. I have entertained that possibility. In my former religious life, that was one of the mainstays of the teaching, is that if you're not enough, if you don't live up to the standard, you can go to hell. And that is, I've had hell described to me. Have any of you had that experience? There's a lot of pictures of hell online. It's a very nice service to have to know what hell looks like. So, and it's always these flames, and it's always people screaming, and demons on their backs, and all kinds of horrible things that we don't want to end up there. So we do want to be enough. We want to be adequate in order to get there. That's the incentive for being good is fear. You take fear out of it, and there's no incentive to be in that particular line of thinking. It's based on fear. And so that's a very strong thing. If you were born with parents that taught you from day one that you were not given a spirit of fear, like 1 John says, but a spirit of love and power. If that was driven into your head from day one, and then, go get your education, go to school, go do these things, but you're okay as you are. You're doing these because they'll serve you better later in life. That's one of the things I'm glad I learned to do in school was type, because I love typing. I love writing. And I am very glad that we have typewriters. If I had to write books with a pencil or pen, I would not write books. It's just too much of a hassle. But that's the way they always used to do it. And even a typewriter, a manual typewriter, I don't really want to do that. But I'm glad I learned that. And nobody could have told me while I was learning that how I would use it later in life. But that's one of those things I'm glad I did. But the point is, we are... this whole idea of being afraid not to do something because we may not make the mark, that's a negative incentive. And fear is used a lot of times in that way. And so we can pick it up through osmosis, basically, just through cultural osmosis. It's not that anybody set us down and said, learn to be afraid so you'll get things done in life. That it doesn't happen that way. We're often presented with consequences. If we don't do something, here's what will happen. And I like to kind of discover that on my own. Like if I am writing, if I'm doing something I like to do, if I'm photographing, if I'm doing some hobby that I like, if I get it wrong, then I usually learn more from my mistake. And I could say, well, that picture or that article or whatever is inadequate, so it needs to be fixed. That's okay. That's not negative incentive. The incentive is, I did this and I can do it better. It's a positive incentive. And if we had more of that, and we do have plenty of that, but it's often mixed in with the other. I'm just not good enough. When I wrote my first novel and was trying to get an agent to handle it, you go through all these this process of writing query letters and all kinds of things that they make you do, and they make you do it exactly right. And you put a package together and you send it to an agent, and then you get a letter back 3 months later that says, it's a mimeographed copy that says, "Dear writer, go jump off a cliff. You're not even worth looking at." It's like they didn't even read, what they demand you to prepare properly and send. And so you think that doesn't stir up some feelings of inadequacy? It stirs up major feelings of inadequacy when you get your 100th rejection slip. And I think out of all the inquiries I sent out, and there was probably several hundred, I got one human being that wrote back and said, we like this, but it's not really for us, and explained why. And so that was very helpful. If I would have had 100 of those, I might have been able to make the manuscript into something they wanted. So it's like it just cuts you off. And so you can start feeling pretty inadequate, like you're not enough if you go by that. And it's the nature of the system. Every agent gets thousands of people like myself, wannabe writers that, ask them for their help. And we all think that ours is the very best thing that they have ever seen, and they can't live without it. And then you get a Dear Writer letter back that assures you they can live without it and will. And that's the way it is. So you have to keep working with that process or choose another. And I chose another, which is self-publishing. I've had Unity publish, a couple of my books, and that was all good. But I prefer actually the freedom of self-publishing, because then you don't have to write to somebody else's standard. So there's a learning process, and it's if you take your inadequate attitude, you will never get past that. You'll stop and you'll say, I'm just not worthy. I'm not a worthy writer. But if you say, well, I'm not going to stop there, I'm going to take another route, I'm going to study another way to get up to that mountaintop and go a different way. So there's many ways, but sometimes we don't get that. Sometimes we're told, maybe by a father or by a mother or some person in a position of authority, that we're not enough. Somehow we're not enough. And so we take that in, and it becomes us. Well, this woman apparently did this. She had her near-death experience, and she rose above the personal self-image, the body-based self-image that thought it was not enough. And that's the point, is that she discovered she was more than enough. And the important point to that is that more than enough was with her all along. It's just that it took a very dramatic and traumatic failure in surgery for her to have this experience. And the good news is we don't have to all have a near-death experience to come to this. We talk about it. We look at it in different ways. We take a logical approach that where we know that we are something more than what we have thought or that somebody else has thought. And we work at getting in touch with that until we know that is true. And the only way we can really do this, short of a near-death experience, you can have one if you want to. I don't really want to risk it at this point. But that's one of the things that stands out to me in these stories, is that people always discover they are more than they thought. It's not something they create when that near-death experience happens. It's something that's there, that's uncovered. So as I've said many times, it's not about building character. It's not about building something. It's about recovering something. It's about waking up to what we already are and what we already have. And when we take that attitude that it's already there waiting for us to see it, it's a very different thing. That's the woman that has 10 coins. She lost one. She knows she has it. So what does she do? She puts her full attention on the house cleaning so she can find it. And she does. And she already has it. She's recovering something she already has. And that part of us that feels inadequate, that's our lost coin. That's that part of us that it's there and we have somehow covered it up. And maybe that's been going on a long time, as this woman said, from childhood. So it's an important revelation to have. I just like that feeling that which I'm looking for, and we're all seeking a greater experience, that which allows that to happen is already here. When you take the attitude that that's true, that light is already shining, I'm just not seeing it, but I can see it, that it's within my sight, it's within my view. That's a very different thing than thinking I've got to build this thing up. That's one thing I write about in one of my books, or maybe all of them, I don't remember exactly, but this idea of developing the soul. What if we act as if the soul is already developed, it's just a matter of discovering? And that's the truth, I think. The kingdom of God within, that's what it means. The kingdom of God is already complete. It's within us. So it's a matter of self-discovery, of self-bringing forth that we are already more than enough. And whenever we are fearing, that is a sign to us that we have dropped down into that inadequate self, that inadequate self-image, I should say, and said, that's what I am. Well, it's not what I am. And so we'll look at that in just a moment. When we drop down there, that should be a signal to us that we have done that, and that the way to deal with it is to remember who and what we are at a deeper level. Most fear arises from the belief that we in some way are not enough. We don't have enough faith, courage, knowledge, goodness, strength, or love to meet some demand. We note that Karen, who is the near-death experiencer, did not become enough to overcome her fear by practicing the teachings of a religion. And this says nothing about religion. It's not a negative statement about religion. But many people are in a religion because they think they're not enough, and they must be in this so they'll make the bar, so they'll make the grade. And that's okay. If you believe that you've got to be in it so you'll be okay, then stay in it. You should be in it. But all of us here have graduated from that level of thinking, or we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be in a place like this. We have said, and maybe we all looked for the rest of ourselves in another religion someplace. Or maybe we look for the rest of ourselves in unity. But the rest of ourself is not in a religion. It's not in learning the teachings of a religion. It's not in practicing a religion. It's in waking up to who and what we are, and hopefully the religion is helping us do that. I have said before, too, that when religion is designed to save you from something, you are operating out of you're protecting a weakness. And that weakness is fear. I'm afraid I'm going to go to hell if I don't do what this religion says. Something like this teaching is not protecting you from a weakness. It is encouraging you to evolve a strength, come from a point of strength. So instead of providing a safety net, come to this community and you'll be saved. It is providing education. Learn about who and what you are, and the fear will naturally dissipate. That which feels inadequate in you, if you touch that deeper level of yourself, you'll find that nothing could be further from the truth. That you are totally adequate. You are capable of being here. We all, I think, made the choice to come here, not here, but to this planet, to this earthly experience, because we were quite capable. That we all had the ability. We made the choice because we knew we could do it. And sometimes I think we get involved in living life, and we get involved in so many identities, so many cross currents going on, that we lose sight of that original power, that center of power that is the soul. And we rise up into this self-image, this self-definition. And the definition has come not only from self, but from culture, from parents, from family, from many different sources. And we start thinking that's the reality. That's who I am. And we look at the grades we made. We look at how good we were at high school football, which to me was a disaster. I could play ping pong, though. So I found my center of power playing ping pong. And then I learned I could entertain people with a guitar. So I found that to be very helpful. But even that, I found that there was a period in my life where I felt like if somebody could hear me play and sing, they would like me better. And that's not any better. It's just because I can do that doesn't mean that they should like me for that reason. If they don't like me for who I am, they probably won't like me at all. So, because I'm not always going to sing and play guitar. In fact, I haven't done that for quite, well, I had to do it last week because somebody was gone. But no, I'm just giving you a hard time. Like you need that. But if we are using some technique to get through life, what life will ultimately tell us in some way, it'll trip us up somehow and say, stop using that. You're more than that. Because you're not always going to be on your game when you're doing your performance. But there's something in you that cannot be hurt or destroyed, and that is much more than you have thought up to this point. So let's bring that out. Let's not use something we can do to hold out there so people will like us. Let's hold ourselves out there. And if they don't like us, then it's their loss, right? Too bad. You are the gift that you've come to give this world. You and I, we are that gift. And we don't always think that. We think we got to be somebody else to entertain or to be something we're not, something more than we are. And that's just never true. And it's better to sit off by yourself, being true to yourself, than it is trying to fit into a crowd, being something that you've got to maintain, putting on a facade that you have to maintain. I've done that, and it's very difficult to do. It's difficult to keep it up. It takes a lot of energy. We all do it in a way, because there's the public self that we all have, there's the family self that we all have, there's several selves that we put out there at different times. But there's that self you have when you're sitting by yourself. When you're all alone, there's nobody around, and it's just you. And that's when you probably feel the most relaxed, most comfortable, because you don't have to be anything to anyone, not even yourself. So this Karen became enough by rising above her body-based self-image and seeing the truth of who she really was. She literally had to lose everything before she awakened to the reality that she was not given a spirit of fear, but a spirit of love and power. I've shared with you many times a story of in the church we had in Evergreen, we ran into a problem, and it looked like it was the end of the world as far as I was concerned. My career was at stake. We could have lost our house. We were losing our church. We were losing everything, I thought. And so every day I would get up and pray that this thing turn around, show me some sign that something's working. And every day it seemed to get worse and worse and worse. So one day I sat down to pray, and suddenly I felt like I hit my center of power. Like it didn't matter what happened. Whatever happened, I'd be okay. And I don't know how to get to that kind of place, but when I did get to that place, nothing in the outer changed. It just kept getting worse. But I looked at it, and I was genuinely okay with it, and I stress genuinely. It wasn't something I was trying to do. You'll hear people say, fake it till you make it. Try to be positive. Well, I wasn't trying to be positive. I was positive. I hit that place in myself like it was rock bottom. But it's not really rock bottom. It gives you a place to spring from. It gives you a place to plant your feet so you can get out of the hole. And it's like, again, nothing in the outer changed. And so as I look back on that period and see how it all unfolded, it was an incredibly beautiful experience. Every step of the way from that point on, there was still a lot of uncertainty, but that's not what matters. What matters is finding yourself, finding that center of power. Because once you do, you can't be argued off of it. The circumstance pops up and tries to argue you off of it. You're not so powerful. Just watch this. Let me show you this. This is much more powerful than you are. And you get where you say, well, give me your best shot. Show me what you got. Because I think I'm okay. And when you get to that point, you found your center of power. And hopefully you're not in a situation where that has to happen. But if you are, if you're in a situation where you feel so backed up against the wall that you don't know what to do, you don't have to know what to do. The time will come when that button will go off, that trigger will be triggered, and you'll say, I've gone back as far as I'm going to go. I have found my center of strength, my center of power. I am adequate. I am enough. I'm more than enough. And whatever you're throwing at me, you're not going to succeed. And it's not that life is trying to put us down, but we are in a state of fear when we're off our center of power. That's the point I'm trying to make here, is if you're reacting in fear, you're not at your center of power. It's a signal. It's not a threat. It's a signal. And you say, okay, I'm not at my center of power because I'm deathly afraid. And how do I get through this? Our inclination is to go out and tear that thing apart, be bigger than it is in whatever way we have to do that. That's not where we start. That's where we end up. Where we start is making that shift in perception that I'm not relying on what I have in my pocket or in my hands. I rely on what I am. That's when we become adequate. That's when we become enough. And that self is always there, that self that I discovered in that moment of, it was 3 months of terror that I had lived in. And it's hard to describe that. I'm sure everyone has had one of these in some way. But, and I don't want another one. I don't care to bring them on just so I can prove I'm adequate, please. But I don't know that I've learned that lesson fully, because I can easily get sucked into appearances still. And usually they're not that severe, of that particular situation. But we still forget, we still get lost in what we have rather than what we are. And so this is what we want to come back to. So the best time to begin to practice that is when we're not up against the wall. It's like now when things are going fairly smooth or more or less smooth. For him who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But for him who has not, even what he has will be taken away. This has always been kind of a mystery to me until I think of it from this perspective. When you find your center of power, more is given. More power is given. You have everything you need. When you're not in your center of power, even the power you think you have will be taken away. It's a matter of finding who you are, that foundation. So the translation of this, to him who has, the one that is saying, I am enough. That's the has, that's what you want. More is given. We're free to live life to its fullest. From him who has not, person saying, I'm not enough. What he has will be taken away. And through some crisis, we discover our true center of power. But the thing I'm wanting to say here is it's not taken away. What's taken away is the belief we are not enough. That's what's taken away. And that's a good thing, but it hurts sometimes. It's painful. It's scary. Nobody wants to get in over their head on anything. But sometimes when we do, it's one of the most meaningful lessons that we can encounter. But we don't have to learn that way. That's the important thing that we want to bear in mind. There's probably something in every challenge that we face that we can learn. We can learn from everything. But do we want to learn that way? Do we want to continue learning that way? Or do we want to do it while things are working pretty well and get to that point in ourselves? What am I trusting? What do I really believe? What do I really, where is my faith? Is it in life going smooth and, everything going like it's going right now, going well? Or am I living out of that deeper level of myself? That's what we look at. The experience of fear is foreign to the soul. Most of us know what it is to be pushed to a point of not knowing what to do. And we most likely experienced fear with every step it took to get to this place. Just what I said. Going down to that place where my back felt totally against the wall. Every step it took to get there was fear, based on fear. And then you get down to a point where I don't have to be afraid. I don't have any more to lose. And that's when you start discovering you have everything. You have nothing. You won't lose what you have, what you truly have. When we are afraid, we are not in possession of what we truly have. And that's something to think about. If you're experiencing fear, it's because you're not experiencing what you truly already have. And so if something is triggering that fear, Job said, the thing I fear most has come upon me. In a way, that's a real blessing. Your fear, the thing you fear most comes upon you. You look at yourself, I'm reacting in fear. Why? So you get to the point where you say, that which is in me is greater than that which is in the world. I was not given a spirit of fear, but I'm acting out of it. So I'm doing something I should not be doing or I need not be doing. And that's a reaction of fear. Almost unexpectedly, having lost hope, we discovered strength we did not know we had. And that is what I just told you in my own experience. It is, think of a time you did this. Think of a time it happened to you where it looked like everything was lost. And then you found yourself. You found that center of strength. Again, we don't want to have to go through those kinds of things. But just think of a time when you did, and think of how you made the comeback and what triggered that, what allowed you to do it. Sometimes it's just a thought. In my case, it was a thought. It's like, I don't care what happens. I'm okay. I'll be okay. I'll get through this. Bring me your very worst case scenario. That's one of the techniques that we can use. Just imagine the worst case scenario. See yourself working through that, and you can do it. So we don't want to go through the worst case scenario, but we're capable of doing it. We always have that center of power. We never lose that, and that's what's important to know. This brings us to an important point to consider. Fear is a signal that we are protecting a weakness, a signal that it's time to find our true center of power. We turn the table on fear by expressing from our center of strength. And that's what's important, to see fear as not something to be overcome, but a signal that we're not seeing this from our center of power. Let it be a signal, and you'll take a different view of fear. Anytime you fear, it's your oil light in your car coming on. It needs oil. That's all. It's not anything to be afraid of. The car needs oil. So when I'm fearing, the way I put oil in my car is I sit down and I get back in touch with that center of power, that which is in me is greater than that which is in the world. Open myself to that level until I start feeling different about things. I don't know what to do right now, but I will know. I will know when the time comes. And I just keep taking steps, keep moving in that direction, and things work out. Strength is inherent to our being. Like Karen Thomas, who spent her early life believing she was not enough, we make the shift into realizing we are so much more. In other words, regardless of how things appear, we are enough right now. And the good news is that we do not have to have an NDE, a near-death experience, to find the strength to overcome any fear. We affirm it until we know it's true. So if we can just be mindful of this idea. You're going through your life this week, something pops up, you find yourself reacting in fear. Say, I've moved out of my center of power. And this reaction of fear is that signal that I've done that. Am I going to live with that? Am I going to be happy with that? It doesn't mean that we don't go out and fix the problem, but it's how you fix it. Do you want to fix it out of fear? Do you want to go to church because you're afraid you're going to go to hell? Or do you want to go to church because you want to, because you're learning something? Totally different experience. So that's how we want to approach our life. Thank you for watching this week's program. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with others. We want to reach as many people as we can, and we appreciate your help. If you'd like to help support this ministry, just click the donate card at the top right-hand corner of your screen. Your financial support means a lot to us. We have many subjects in our video lineup, so feel free to take a look. If there's a topic you don't see and would like me to address, just put it in the comment section. I'd love to know what's on your mind. To subscribe to this channel, simply click our logo. Thanks again for your interest in Independent Unity, and have a wonderful week.